Welcome back to Learning Pharmacology, Pharmacy. Today we are going to see about antimicrobial drugs. So what are antimicrobial drugs? From the name itself we can get some idea. So these are the drugs which act against microbes. So these are medicines used to prevent and treat infection caused by microbes in humans, animals and plants. We know that these microbes are capable of causing certain kind of infections and thereby diseases in humans, animals and plants. So we use antimicrobials in order to prevent as well as treat the infection caused by these microbes. So these antimicrobial drugs includes antibiotics, antivirals, antifungal and antiparasitics. So antibiotics are the antimicrobial drugs which act against bacteria, and antivirals are the ones that act against viruses. Fungals are the ones that act against Antifungals are the ones that act against fungi, and these are ones that act against parasites. And there are different classifications for this antimicrobial drugs. First is based on their chemical structure. Second is based on their mechanism of action, how they act, or what is their mode of action in order to prevent these microbes, or in order to treat the infections that is caused by these microbes. Then third one is type of organisms against which they act, whether they act against bacteria, virus, fungi. Based on that we can classify antimicrobial drugs. Then the spectrum of activity, whether it is narrow spectrum or broad spectrum. Then types of action. Then final one, where they are obtained from, like their source. So all these 6 classifications are there for antimicrobial drugs. We'll see them one by one. So the first classification under chemical structure is sulfonamide and related drugs. So these sulfonamides, under sulfonamide classification we have compounds, antimicrobial compounds that contain sulfonamido group, that is this group. So this is the basic structure of a sulfonamide drug. Examples for sulfonamide drugs are sulfadiazine, sulfamethoxazole and sulfacetamide. The second one is diaminopyrimidates. So this is the basic structure. This is the pyrimidine structure with the 2 amino group, and examples are trimethoprim and pyrimethamine. So the next under chemical structure is quinolones, and the drugs are nalidixic acid, norfloxacin, ciprofloxacin and gatifloxacin. Next is Beta-Lactam antibiotics, that is they contain beta-lactam structure in them, and the drugs are penicillins, cephalosporins, monobactam, carbapenems. Fifth classification is tetracycline, and the drugs are oxytetracycline and doxycycline. Then sixth one is nitrobenzene derivatives, and the corresponding drug is chloraphenicol. For aminoglycosides, streptomycin, gentamicin, amikacin and neomycin. Then macrolide antibiotics, which include erythromycin, clarithromycin, azithromycin. Then finally lincosamide antibiotics, lincomycin, clindamycin. So next one is Glycopeptide antibiotics, and the drugs under that class are vancomycin and teicoplanin. Then oxazolidinone, and the drug is linezolid. Next is polypeptide antibiotics. We have polymyxin B, colistin and bacitracin. Then nitrofuran derivatives, nitrofurantoin and furazolidone. Then nitroimidazole, that is metronidazole and tinidazole. Then nicotinic acid derivatives. Then the drugs are isoniazid and pyrazinamide. Then choline antibiotics, nystatin and amphotericin B. Then azole derivatives, miconazole, clotrimazole and fluconazole. Then others are rifampin, chrysopulvin. So these are the 18 classification that comes under chemical structure. So next classification is based on mechanism of action. So these antimicrobial drugs can inhibit these microbes, or they can prevent the infection of the, or kill these antimicrobes in any of the 8 mechanism of action. So let us see the first 4. First one is by inhibiting the cell wall synthesis of these antimicrobes, and the drugs which do so are penicillins, cephalosporin, and vancomycin. Second is by causing leakage from cell membrane. The second mechanism of action is by causing leakage from cell membrane, and this is done by polypeptide antibiotics, which include polymyxin, colicitin, and bacitracin, and also poline antibiotics, which includes the drugs like amphotericin B, nystatin. And third way is by inhibiting protein synthesis, and the drugs which do so are tetracyclines and chloramphenicol. And the fourth one is by causing misreading of mRNA code and affect the permeability of the microbes. And the drugs are aminoglycoside drugs, which include streptomycin, gentamicin, etc. Let's see the next one. By inhibiting the DNA gyrase, and the drugs that do so is fluoroquinolone class of drugs, which include ciprofloxacin and others. Then next is by interfering with the DNA function, and the drugs are rifampin and metronidazole. Then interfere with the DNA synthesis, acyclovir and cidovudine do that. Then interfere with intermediary metabolites, or we can call them antimetabolites, and the drugs are sulfonamides and trimethoprim. The next classification is based on the type of organism against which these antimicrobial drugs act. First one is antibacterial, that is they act against bacteria. Okay, so they are maybe bactericidal or bacteriostatic in nature. So antibacterial drugs are penicillins, aminoglycosides, erythromycins, etc. And next is antifungal, that is they act against fungi, griseofulvin, amphotericin B, ketoconazole, etc. Then antiviral, they are acyclovir, amantadine, cidovudine, etc. Then antiprotozoal, that is they act against protozoa, chloroquine, metronidazole, etc. And finally we have anthelmintic, mebendazole, niclosamide, etc. So this anthelmintic means these are the drugs which are used to treat infection with parasitic worms like tapeworm, roundworm, etc. So they are called anthelmintic, and the drugs are mebendazole, niclosamide, etc. Next is based on the spectrum of activity, that is the range of different microorganisms that an antimicrobial agent can inhibit or kill. So they are classified as narrow spectrum and broad spectrum. So these narrow spectrum antibiotics can kill or inhibit fewer number of microorganisms, whereas broad spectrum antibiotics can kill more number of microorganisms. So the narrow spectrum drugs under narrow spectrum are penicillin G, streptomycin, erythromycin, and broad spectrum are tetracyclines and chloramphenicol. Next classification based on the type of action, whether they are bacteriostatic in nature or bactericidal in nature. Bacteriostatic means prevents the growth of bacteria. Bacteriostatic, that is prevents the growth of bacteria. And the drugs are penicillins, aminoglycosides, polypeptides, rifampin, isoniazid, pyrazinamide. Whereas bactericidal are the ones that kill the bacteria, and the drugs are cephalosporins, vancomycin, nalidixic acid, then ciprofloxacin, metronidazole, and cotrimoxazole. Here we have to note that some primarily static drugs can become cidal in nature. That is, static means prevents the growth. They can become the drugs which can kill the bacteria at higher concentration. Examples are sulfonamides, erythromycin, nitrofurantoin. And on the other hand, some cidal drugs, that is killing drugs, can be bacteriostatic in nature under certain circumstances. Examples are cotrimoxazole, and streptomycin. The final classification is based on from where these antibiotics are obtained from or its source. First one is from fungi as the source, and the drugs are penicillin, cephalosporin, chrysophelvin. From bacteria, polymyxin B, bacitracin, colistin, and tyrothromycin. Then actinomycetes, aminoglycosides, chloramphenicol, polines, tetracycline, and macrolides. We will continue the rest in the next video. Bye.